Thank you very much, General, very much. And Claudia, thank you for hosting this today. I recognize after that long list of distinguished people coming that I'm truly the small opening act. So thanks everybody for being here. I elected to speak out today and make a speech about national security marking the day of the elections in Afghanistan. But I wanted to make a speech about what I have strongly felt needed to be done. And that is a strategy, a national strategy of re-engagement in this world. In my time in the military, I witnessed two large paradigm shifts. The end of the Cold War left us as the sole superpower. And 9/11 showed us how vulnerable that position can be. 9/11 confirmed what we'd long feared, that in the modern world, having the most capable and powerful military force in the history of this planet cannot always protect us from a determined few. The response of the Bush administration to this realization might best be described as crisis-driven. The response was to lash out at threats, real or contrived, and rush into conflict without clear missions, benchmarks, or exit strategies. We pursued a with us or against attitude that cost us valuable allies and lowered our standing in the eyes of those allies we did keep. We diminished our core principles, such as a commitment to human rights, as quaint, even nostalgic. We let our investment in foreign aid and development dwindle and viewed adept diplomacy as weakness and reliance on force as strength. As a new administration sets a new course, I believe we must fundamentally reconsider the function of our military in the nation's foreign policy. We're now in a world where the unconventional threat has become conventional, and the conventional threat is steadily being subtracted from the calculus of our national security. We must recognize that increasingly there will be no military solution to the problems of the 21st century. The growing power of conventional weapons and the mutually assured destruction of nuclear arms means the near end of full-scale war between major powers. And traditional military structure, strategy, and role in foreign policy will be increasingly unable to cope with insurgency, extremism, and terrorism, as well as environmental and humanitarian crises. There are conflicts around the globe, but none of those involve pitched battles of infantry and tanks, dogfighting planes, or ships at sea trading salvos. The combat of the 21st century will generally be small scale, and the wars will be technological, ideological, and economic. If we do not begin now, more than ever, to plan for the obsolescence of the traditional concept of warfare that has persisted since the beginning of civilization, and to better address transnational threats like the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, it will mean at best a loss of an opportunity for the United States to lead into a new era, or at worst, a military catastrophe, really a security catastrophe, the likes of which we are blessed enough to avoid during the Cold War. During my time in the Clinton administration, I helped develop a national security strategy of engagement that foresaw many of our recent strategic errors and recognized that the challenges of the future do call for a comprehensive approach to foreign and domestic policy, one holistic national security policy. It called for the use of force when vital or important American interests were threatened. It demanded clear benchmarks, timetables, and strategies for withdrawal, and promoted strong diplomacy and robust foreign aid programs that were to take precedence over force whenever and wherever possible. We must return to those priorities and to the understanding that America is peaceful and prosperous when the rest of the world is peaceful and prosperous. Increasingly, technology is making this world a very small, a very crowded place. Effects ripple farther and faster than ever before. Threats are never far away, and everywhere interests are intertwined: military, diplomatic, economic, environmental, humanitarian. We cannot partition any longer our view of national security in discrete artificial spheres that no longer exist. We have recently seen, for instance, how international overfishing off the Horn of Africa, resulting from the collapse of the Somali state, allowed it to become a haven for pirates who have threatened American citizens and commerce. We must now take a comprehensive approach to our engagement, our re-engagement in the world that actually utilizes robust diplomacy, strategic foreign aid, and a military force only as a last resort. Though threats may emerge from anywhere, we cannot and should not seek to police the globe. We maintain the right to defend ourselves and strike at our enemies unilaterally if necessary. But we must unequivocally deny the Bush doctrine of preemptive war and reject the cynical belief that the moral principles of this nation are luxuries for quieter times that do not have tangible strategic value in a dangerous world. Our principled leadership in the world has long inspired allies to join us. And more than ever, we must depend on a shared vigilance to guard against threats that are defined by no border and no nation. We must have a strategy of engagement that is creative and constructive. As a nation, we have already learned the power of this philosophy. World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. Instead, we failed to support the League of Nations, arms control, and institutions of international economic stability. The result was the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, and World War II. After World War II, we recognized the need to then construct institutions to provide international stability and began to develop a comprehensive view of our national security. We recognized economic threats are as potent as military ones and instituted the Marshall Plan and founded the IMF and World Bank. We entered into arms control and defense agreement with dozens of nations around the globe, and we built firm alliances that continue to strengthen our country today. It was the strength of these institutions under U.S. leadership and a commitment to a proactive foreign policy, not just technological and military prowess, that allowed us to prevail in this second major war, the Cold War. Recently, however, we have turned away from these international tools and institutions that for so long have been reliable forces of stability, like the ABM Treaty and Kyoto protocols, and have favored going ahead unilaterally instead of promoting multilateral engagement and coordination, even in conflict, if one compares the first and the second Gulf Wars. Simultaneously, neglect of domestic institutions that help us engage abroad has also hindered our ability to project our foreign policy. For example, during Vietnam, the U.S. Agency of International Development, USAID, had 15,000 Foreign Service officers, with 5,000 of them in Vietnam. Now we only have 4,000 USAID Foreign Service officers total, and just a handful in Afghanistan. The question today is not whether to recommit ourselves to these institutions and approaches, but how to adapt them to the modern contingencies. My experience in the military was bounded by two controversial wars, Vietnam and Iraq. My thought process was formed by the ravages of war and the challenges of peace. I've learned that the military can stop problems. It can't fix them. Similarly, effective foreign policy doesn't just solve problems, it actually can prevent them. What I believe in is preemptive diplomacy, not a preemptive military. It is a foreign policy approach that, rather than leading with force, uses all elements of our power to help shape the world and create conditions for peace and prosperity, which enhances our security. To have viable preventive diplomacy requires, first, a comprehensive acceptance of our real national security challenges, not just military, but economic or political. As you mentioned, General, The Director of National Intelligence rightly called economic instability around the world the primary danger to our nation's security. For example, hundreds of thousands of young Muslim men from Tajikistan, having lost their employment now in Russia's oil fields during this global recession, have returned home without a means of livelihood next to Afghanistan, where a living wage, more than ideology, might attract them to the Taliban. Studies suggest, actually, that up to 70% of the Taliban may be fighting for economic rather than ideological reasons. Second, we need a comprehensive response to these challenges that incorporates not just a transformed and multifunctional military, but also the power of our economy, our rule of law, and non-governmental organizations, while utilizing our military forces as a constructive tool rather than just military force as a destructive weapon. And third, we need changes in our internal decision-making apparatus that allow us to respond in a multifaceted way to complex threats. We presently have an interagency governmental system of questionable coordination, one still based upon traditional foreign policy domination by the military and intelligence organizations. We need a military that is unmatched, with a demonstrated capability to prevail under any circumstance, to act as an effective deterrent to conventional threats that can still persist. But we also need a military that can respond quickly and effectively to the exigencies of the global war against terrorism, and is prepared from the outset to wage and win a battle that is as much ideological, political, and economic as it is military. We must discard permanently our compartmentalized view of the threats and challenges we face. The real world does not align with our bureaucracies, and our adversities do not neatly characterize themselves into domestic or foreign, economic or political, military or diplomatic. For example, how should we approach the problem of narcotics? It's a domestic health issue, a border control issue, a criminal issue of both national and international law, a problem for ourselves and our allies, an economic issue for the impoverished farmer with no alternative. And when the money goes directly to support terrorists, it's an intelligence and military issue. If we view or try to tackle the problem piecemeal, we fail. That's why we need to revamp our internal decision-making entities to allow for the collective decision-making needed to tackle such complex problems. 9/11 brought to light a failure to communicate just between the CIA and FBI. But what we need is productive communications among our most seemingly disparate institutions and agencies. We cannot respond to modern threats with the same old institutions, archaic bureaucracies, and petty turf wars that I saw. We need clear and decisive leadership at the highest of levels, and we have to send the message throughout the ranks. It's time to put aside the institutional politics because America's security is at stake. I'd like to offer 3 key illustrations of how we can put preventive diplomacy into action. The first is by taking the lead once more on proactive international institutions and treaties, from counterproliferation to the IMF and World Bank, but take specifically the Kyoto Protocols. This is far from simply an environmental issue. Internationally, it's an opportunity to restore America's leadership. And domestically, it is a chance to reduce pollution and improve the health of our people. It can strengthen our strategic position economically by reducing our dependence on foreign oil. And it can begin to curb the climate change which threatens to create all over the world the economic adversity, cultural upheaval, and political instability that breeds insurgency, extremism, and terrorism. The second is how we evolve our more conventional strategic systems to focus on contemporary, more unconventional threats, such as a potential nuclear armed missile threat from nations such as Iran. Currently, we're planning to put fixed missile defense systems in the Czech Republic and Poland to counter Iran, which in Russia's eyes threatens a strategic balance of power. Instead, at minimal expense, and I mean de minimis expense, we can upgrade our Aegis Navy cruisers to provide theater and even, if one desires, national defense that can protect all, not just some, as the sites in Czech do, of Europe and even Israel. Can adapt to shifting threats worldwide as they move, and can do so in a manner that won't be seen as a direct provocation of Russia and China. In fact, we can bargain our plans for fixed sites in exchange for Russia withholding its support of Iran's nuclear program. We lose nothing in terms of capability and take a potential for instability and turn it into an opportunity to increase global stability. Finally, we must examine our role in the global war of terror, specifically beginning with Afghanistan and Pakistan. Our experience has shown that we need a military that can not only overwhelm an enemy, but can actually earn the trust of the populace. Our military cannot achieve success alone. It cannot operate side by side with diplomatic and aid efforts. It must be intertwined with them. And we have to be as tough and cunning diplomatically as we are militarily. We must have national, ideological, and diplomatic confidence to engage and convert, at least blunt, elements of the Taliban, many of whom are economically displaced and simply looking for a way to make a living. We must recognize the limits of what our military can do using force in the global war of terror. But our forces used in support of security, as well as for the trust needed for economic development efforts in Afghanistan, as forces, not force, are what will eventually permit us to exit an area where we cannot remain forever and allow us to achieve our goal of a legitimate, if limited, central government in Kabul that governs in conjunction with local and regional authorities. But importantly, the administration must provide, even belatedly, but it must provide a clear exit strategy. And there must be measures along that path to assess success or failure and measure the reward of continuing to invest troops and money and other national resources in the effort. It is crucial that we develop these tools because we cannot fight and nation build everywhere. The Afghanistan-Pakistan border is the fulcrum of the entire war on terrorism. U.S. force can play a role in stabilizing Afghanistan, providing some support to Pakistan, and occasionally striking at al-Qaeda and the Taliban in that country. But we cannot solve the challenge of Pakistan militarily. We must use every tool in our arsenal in a coordinated effort to encourage and pressure Pakistan to turn its focus away from India to the real internal threat it faces from insurgency and terrorism. In sum, what the United States has lacked is an overall template of how best to engage the world. In short, really, how to engage this world. We had one during the Cold War. It was successful. It was against a fixed and a known threat in a very stable world where national boundaries were respected. Constructing an analogous template today is more challenging. Lines are blurred between domestic and international problems, and threats to our ideals and interests are constantly shifting. But if we want to create conditions for U.S. interests to thrive, as they did during the Cold War, and ensure constructive and creative U.S. decision-making will best shape this world, we cannot have a crisis-driven foreign policy. It was a best effort to confront this challenge of constructive engagement during the Clinton administration, as international institutions were not abandoned after the Cold War, but were realigned to a newly emerging world, as with the expansion of NATO. It is crucial that we return to developing the strategic template of preventive diplomacy today. Without that strategic template, we will be at the mercy of unintended consequences, as decisions here at home will be made in a reactive, ad hoc, even an uncoordinated, unconscious manner. Every commander knows how quickly short-sighted tactical gain can lead to long-term strategic failure. for one example, the abandonment of a coherent U.S.-led international template for proper international analysis for nuclear arms control meant that the potentially unintended repercussions of a recent proposal from the Pentagon in its budget to replace certain nuclear warheads with conventional ones on look-alike missiles simply went overlooked. Modern threats are too widespread, too rapidly developing, and too potentially devastating to allow this to happen. A strategic failure. We cannot lack a template abroad that focuses proper resource allocation and decision-making attention for it at home. We must have a clear template for engaging the world that shifts focus and resources to diplomacy and foreign aid, reasserts the importance of international treaties and organizations and our leadership of them, and views our military forces as a constructive tool that supports our foreign policy efforts. This view represents a fundamental shift from the dominant policies of recent years, and will no doubt face significant institutional opposition on many fronts, including Congress. But it will be necessary if America wants to again lead and shape this world for its and the world's betterment, rather than to be at odds and at the mercy of it once again. Thank you, and the best part, if I could entertain questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.